What is the numbness effect?
You become emotionally desensitized, right, to the things that should move us, right? We should be moved to absolutely shattered pieces of ourselves when we see the footage of Gaza at them. We should be moved by gun violence in schools, suffering through hunger. This should shake us to our cores as human beings.
And we're built to be shook.
Yes.
By
I
our
do
humanity.
believe that. But if we've also been exposed to something too often or too intensely, without a space to process that in a meaningful way, the numbness that can get a grip on us. So it might start out as a protective mechanism of sorts, especially if we kind of confuse empathy for compassion. It's easy to get overwhelmed, more easy to do so than maybe compassion. Might serve as a protective charm for you, but it comes with a cost. So this information overload kind of like comes into it, right? Constant crisis headlines, push notification, and then we also have nothing better to do than doom scroll on our stupid phones all the time, right? So everything feels urgent until nothing feels urgent anymore, right? Because everything is urgent. Or artificially made to feel urgent, right?
And then you lose your ability to react the way that you're naturally built
exactly.
to react.
The same is when you lose your focus, right? You lose your agency to act. And this, especially now, is we cannot afford any other single person to lose their agency, right? If the history books will be written in 50 or 100 years, which side will I be on? On which page will I be mentioned? I don't think it's the time now to be like, oh, I'm just not gonna do with politics.
Jennifer Walter is a Swiss sociologist, podcast host, and mental health advocate. She's also a self-described rebel marshmallow and a highly sensitive person taking the scenic route through life. Grounded in sociology and a deep understanding of the structures that shape our perception of who we are, where we fit, and what is possible, she coaches clients to find the sweet spot in perspective that will help them take agency in their lives. When her quote went viral earlier this year, namely her conclusion that in the current sociopolitical environment, our overwhelm is the point, I knew I had to sit down with her. On today's podcast, we're looking at the playbook of disengaging citizens from our own democracy, and we are talking about how we can all manage to stay engaged without getting lost in the void. I know that you described yourself as a rebel marshmallow. I love that because I thought, well, am I like a spicy grilled cheese sandwich? Because I'm comforting on the inside, you know?
Yeah, I once had the question on a podcast, if you were a vegetable, what vegetable would you be? And I'm like, I'm an artichoke. I'm a lot of work, but the core is good.
And once you love artichoke, you'll never not love artichoke.
Yeah, very true. Very true. It's a brilliant vegetable. No, I mean, I'm happy to talk about the marshmallow thing. What I love about it is you either love it or you hate it, which is very good. Because if you hate it, then you're not inviting me to podcasts.
Exactly.
Which is good.
Look, there is a beautiful confidence of midlife, which some women exude and other women do not. And you exude, but then I'll bookmark people. And then I'll wait until they say something or comment on something in an interesting way, and I'll think, oh, that's the thread.
You're a podcast stalker.
I am. I kind of am. And you know why I came across you was the comment that you made that went viral about how your overwhelm is the goal. We're in a situation that feels very unstable and very unsafe for a lot of people on a lot of different levels. What it comes down to for me is that everybody is overwhelmed. And so I saw your quote.
Yeah.
Your overwhelm is the goal. And you talk about Naomi Klein's shock doctrine. But for people who don't study this, and maybe will never read Naomi Klein's book, how is chaos weaponized? You've
said it yourself. Everyone's overwhelmed. So what is a scarce resource? It's your attention, right? I mean, we've been trained with our smartphones now, and our attention is like oh, bird, another bird. Ooh, right? Like we're so in this like very short attention span that I actually oftentimes I say on social, just go read a book,
Yeah.
right? Or any form of long form content that speaks to you, because it's really, our attention is scarce, right? And we know that where our attention goes, our focus go. If we're really paying attention to something, things grow. If we pay attention to our kids, they feel seen and validated and loved, right? Same with other topics. If I'm really passionate about something, I'm going to pay closer attention and might see if someone's trying to do dirty on that. So, and if you're able to hijack that with always new things, better things, well, not necessarily better, but just always new things, or even shittier things,
Yeah.
you never really kind of like get people to be still enough to think about this, right? We have psychologist Kahneman, it calls them with two systems that help us process information, right? We have system 1 and system 2, who help us like with all these cognitive processing of information. 1 is like fast, automatic, intuitive thinking, very little effort, right? It's just what we think. And system 2 is where we go for slow, deliberate, analytical thinking, critical thinking.
Like reflexive versus focused thinking.
Yes, exactly. So if there's always new things, it's really hard to be like, no, you know what? I'm gonna think on this. So if we have so many decisions and new information coming in, we feel like it depletes our mental resources. We feel overwhelmed, right? And when we have too much information, we see a lot of people shutting down completely. Of like, no, I'm just opting out of all of this, which again speaks to your privilege if you can do that. Not everyone can. They're shutting out, or it leads to people kind of like taking mental shortcuts. For example, stereotyping, or just kind of like, oh, this person, douchebag, whatever he or she says, not worth my time, right? Or whatever kind of like shortcuts our brain can take, we rely much like more heavily on biases and heuristics, and we're kind of like trying to avoid making decisions.
The reason why the word overwhelm jumped out to me is because it feels like the current state of the country is like a daily attack on my critical thinking. If our attention is limited in social media and the strategic weaponization of chaos is scattering that attention,
Yeah.
then scattered attention cannot ever turn into focus. And
Yeah.
focus is the only place we get our critical thinking.
Yeah.
So
your resistance is your focus.
exactly, right? And I think the most dangerous part about this is the people with the privilege, myself included, the people with the privilege to opt out of the overwhelm are the only people who can actually potentially powerfully resist. Because it's not the disenfranchised communities that can afford to opt out of this fear and overwhelm.
Yeah.
And then the people like me who are still somewhat insulated will not always be insulated. I just think the world is crazy right now.
Yeah.
I never would have imagined saying that 5 years ago. But there are a lot of people in America who are way past my potential alarm bell moment. And if people like me opt out, then it's first they came for that person and I said nothing. Then and then at the end,
I mean, it's the 1930s German playbook, right? Like we've seen this happen before. It wasn't overnight, right? It started gradually with disenfranchised communities, marginalized communities that didn't have a lot of people advocating for them, until it's like, well, how did this happen?
Well, and they're the 3 steps, right?
Yeah.
And then you're saying step 1,
there's a flood of executive orders, right?
Well, I mean, it is executive orders, or it's just, it can also just be, nonsense. Like it's, I mean, you gotta have news about, okay, we're gonna impose tariffs on Canada, and not even 48 hours, that news is kind of revoked. So, what, right? But it was like on the news cycle for 48, not even 48 hours. Or you have statements or little snippets, right, that you have this real emotional response to, and sometimes you have to kind of like ask, okay, am I just contributing to the frenzy or to the solution, right? It's not just the executive orders. I mean, Democrats did that too, to some extent. I'm not an expert on American politics, but right, it's just a whole domination of the news cycle.
Right. I think it was Stephen Colbert, and he was like, well, I don't know what's going on in your world right now, but apparently Gaza is the Monaco of the Middle East. We're going to buy Greenland. Also, here's JFK's papers. They were some
exactly. The Gulf of Mexico is not the Gulf of America.
Right? And also citizenship doesn't mean anything, and women are now cattle. How was your day? And it just seemed so clear to me that that has nothing to do with JFK and everything to do with shifting eyeballs and scattering eyeballs, which is really kind of terrifying to me. So step one, flood the universe with so much information that we get disoriented. Step two, information overload creates passivity and disengagement and a lack of ability to analyze. Step three is we fragment the public discourse. So then we can't have any oversight. Where do you think we are in that?
We are already in weakened democratic oversight. We're already within reduced public engagement. I also believe we haven't seen the worst yet. We're recording this in March. So, I mean, it's just been a couple of weeks, really, and we have years. And even, I don't know, we still don't know what's going to happen after those second term. Yeah. Will there be a forever term? Like, right at this point, like, who knows?
I mean, it sounds like that's the goal from whatever I've heard. When you lay out the plan for people, you suggest pick two issues. Focus on them.
Yeah.
Why two? Why not one? Why not five? What is it? What is there a magic number about picking two things to focus on?
No, I had my magic 8-ball and it said two.
You had your magic ball?
Like, no, listen.
Is it because that's how much attention you think you have? Like, what was it?
Yeah, like, it just goes to say it's probably not five, right? But it's so much depends on your mental load, on your capacity to take on things. And if it's just one, that's great, right? I mean, look at it. If we look at charities, I've never came across a multi-purpose charity. Charity are single focus.
Good point. Yeah.
So why do you think that is, right? You can bundle your resources. You can bundle the attention. You can bundle just a focus, and it's not by accident, right? Pick your cause and kind of like focus and bring action to it. If you have enough capacity to bring action to two causes, I love you. You're a hero. Go do it. Right? But for a lot of us, we barely can muster enough capacity for one thing.
One of my best friends from college is a political activist, speaker, comedian, commentator, and his name is Baratunde Thurston, and he talks about how to citizen. How to citizen as a verb, right?
Yeah, love it.
I think what's beautiful about this moment in time is people finally understand what that means. Right. And how we're all sort of falling short of it, because we were never just citizens of one community or one country anyway. We really weren't. Right. And when the aliens, who we know have all been watching us, eventually come and scoop us all up, we'll know that we were all just part of the same small humanity anyway. We just had different hair color and we thought that meant something, and we were all dumb.
Yeah.
We'll get that in the moment before we die. But as a sociologist, I want to know how you chose your line of work and how you got interested in this.
For me, well, first off, I was always the kid who was like, but why? But why? but why is it? So I was always kind of clear I would be doing something where I'm going to get paid to ask questions. And I always had this deep sense of fairness and justice. Of like, why am I allowed to do this and he isn't? Or why is he allowed and I am not? This feels unfair. This is not right. So it felt very kind of like natural when I was at like orientation day at university, and there was this lecturer, and he was like asking all these like very critical questions of how we behave as humans, and I'm like, oh, I love this. I'm home now, and it gave me kind of like the tools or the language to say what I'm always kind of like sensing. So kind of, oh, I'm not imagining it. We're actually following like systems, and how they're designed is how we follow as a collective, right? Of course, individual action is always something else, but if we look at the broader things, we're often not as unique snowflakes that we love to think we are, right?
Not that special.
You're not that special. You are very special, but you're not, like, it's both, right? Yeah, I mean, sociology really kind of, it stepped in when, like, why am I feeling like this?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not feeling good, right? I mean, I was a teenager in the 90s and 2000s, so, like, we had Kate Moss, Heroin Chic, and Kellogg's Special K as a full meal. It was wild, right? So I was made to feel ashamed about the way I look. And I'm like, well, why am I feeling like this? Right? And sociology came in and said, well, you're not imagining this. And here's the structure behind why you're feeling ashamed. So it connected to me the personal experience with kind of like the broader picture. The larger pattern.
It gave you answers for how you fit into the context and how it's logical that you feel the way that you feel. Right?
Yeah,
it's logical.
So the same with overwhelm. It's completely logical to feel overwhelmed because it's a feature. It's by design.
It's a feature, not a bug, of the way that our society is operating and the way that politics is being leveraged right now.
I truly believe that it's not your fault at all that you found the world the way it is. Right? You were born into it, whatever situation, family you've been born into. But if you leave it the same or worse, even worse off when you go, that's also on you. The worst thing also about this whole current climate is that we feel we have no agency, right? And to some extent, right, those systems also thrive on making it deliberately complex, right? Like bureaucratic complexity almost as a barrier to access and accountability. So there are so many things factoring in, right? But I really believe that one conversation at a time, if only someone hears this, if you really then feel called to actually go and do something, then I'm like, that's all. That's great. I got one person to go and stand up for something they believe in, and then go do it. That's cool. Love it.
So you studied sociology, and now you have this business that involves, it's like coaching work, right? One-on-one work. Is this all about agency? Looking at your website and you're talking about feeling never enough, right? Why isn't it easier just to be at fucking peace with who I am? That's a very powerful statement, right? You look at your main website and it says, are you exhausted from being too much in a never enough world?
Yeah.
These are all things that to me seem centered around not just you have to love yourself. It's more than that. It's you do have a sense of agency. You are allowed to opt in to certain ways of life, opt out of certain ways of thinking. You can do it if you get a little bit critical. You can do it if you work with you or someone like you and you do the research, right? So it seems like it's about agency.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you spelled it out like this. And yes, no, like a sense of agency is one of the most, or if not the most radical kind of self love.
Yeah.
It's not bubble baths and treat yourself and whatever, right?
Really not.
This is really grounded and deep of I matter, my choices shape my reality. I'm not powerless even when everyone else tells me so. The coaching kind of started with this deep dissatisfaction of a lot of a big part of the coaching world where it's kind of like, oh, it's because I get the side mark. I always get the question, but you're not a psychologist, you're a sociologist. Like, what does that have to do with anything? And I'm like, okay. It's really like you can work on your mindset. That's important. Not to say it's not. It's important. You can do all the things you want to do to be a better you, to optimize your health, whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're still stuck in a system that's trying to bring you down and hurt you 24/7 relentlessly, it's really really hard to do, to keep up with all your like personal work. And it's also just often it was a form of gaslighting of telling people, oh, you just have to think yourself rich. Well, there are structural components why people are in poverty, and some are by design. And yes, you can have a positive money mindset, but you can acknowledge structural differences, but you can think it further, right? You're having this very late stage capitalistic society. We have a very perverted form of neoliberalism. We have colonialism. We have all these systems that we haven't really dismantled. If we can ever, let's hope so. And of course, they're intersectional. And yes, but it's very similar, right? Like if the water is laced with, let's say, deep, very capitalistic thinking of you are never enough, your worth is only valued by your output, rest is lazy, all these things.
Rest is lazy, aging is disgusting.
Yeah, aging is, of course, yeah. And then,
the problem is, even when we have conversations like this, I meet the most fascinating, brilliant minds, really critical thinkers. But we have conversations like this, and then I'm thrilled and energized.
And then what?
Home, and I'm trying to explain things in a language they can understand. And so it all starts to feel like everything that I might try to do, even to the extent of raising reasonable, compassionate children. It's almost like, what can I do?
Yeah.
Right? And no matter what I do, if I'm marching for women's rights, how much is my footsteps worth? It's just 2 small footsteps, right? All of that. And so my question in that context for you is, what gives you hope?
Well, exactly this, right? That there are people who want to talk about this, who are willing to be like, you know what? Something we can do better than this. Like, is this really like, is this peak like society? Like,
oh God, I hope not.
What? Like, holy fucking hell, right? Like, so just that there is this awareness, that there is this need, this craving for, hey, let's talk about this as well, right? If you change one variable, all the other variables will change as well. It's people, if more and more people start to really engage deeply with these wicked problems, and what comes with that is that we start to become more resilient, and we start to become more at ease with sitting in the unknowing and the uncomfortableness, right? And the more we do that, and the more we do this in a conversation, the more we bring it out into our kids, to our families, to our communities, and to our society at large, right? Because a part of this problem we're also in is we have so little tolerance for things that are uncomfortable. So we always need to find a solution or someone to blame or a distraction. And when we can change that to be like, okay, I can sit with this discomfort.
If the only thing you can do is keep up the conversation, then at the very least you can do that, right?
And show that this is a pattern, right? It's not just your problem. There are a lot of people struggling with this, and I feel this is also comforting to know.
Very comforting. This conversation has been comforting for me.
I mean, it's brutal, but it's comforting.
It's brutal but comforting because nobody wants to be alone in all of it.
Yeah.
But I do want some sort of a prediction from, like I said, mine's brighter than mine. Where do you think this goes?
Well,
this is the part where you tell me I'm wrong. This is the part where you tell me I'm wrong. No?
Yeah.
Please make it better. No, okay.
Look, like, we've said it before. I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. Right? And at the same time, we have even more shit going on right now with climate change, right?
Frogs in a pot.
So right now, yes, of course you could say, I don't know, we'll see what gets us first. Well, leaving everyone cheerful. No, but that's exactly it, right? There's also a liberty that comes with that, right? Saying, you know what? I'm just gonna go try something. Why not? Why not? And for me, it started with putting out a silly Fred's post I wasn't really thinking about. Like, I was thinking about it, but I wasn't really thinking of like, oh, this is going to change worlds, right? I was just like, this is what I think. I need this reminder and memo for myself to not go crazy. And it resonated, right? It really did. So just go out. If you feel, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to do anything. We're doomed anyway. Okay, cool. If that's your approach, then what have you got to lose? Go out and try shit. Wreak havoc. I don't know, march the streets, boycott, do all the things. If everything is already lost anyway, then why not just go out with a bang?